Imagine logging on to Amazon. Right, you're looking to buy a book, but there's no cover, there's no title. There isn't even like a vague paragraph describing what the plot might actually be.
Just a completely blank square.
Literally a blank digital placeholder. And yet, this mysterious, completely empty void of a listing shoots straight past established blockbuster novels to hit #1 on the most sold fiction chart.
I mean, if you didn't know better, it sounds like a glitch in the algorithm. Or some bizarre high-level marketing experiment cooked up in a boardroom.
You would totally think so. But no, that is simply the sheer, undeniable gravitational pull of Rebecca Yarros' Empyrean series.
It really is.
Welcome, everyone, to the Reading Nook Studio. Go ahead and grab your tea, get comfortable. This is our quiet little sanctuary where the three of us, you, me, and our resident book scholar across the table here, can just really look under the hood of the stories we love.
The best place to be.
Exactly. And today we are unpacking a mystery that the fandom essentially forced into the light.
Yeah, that blank Amazon listing was supposed to be a closely guarded secret, but, you really can't hide anything from this community for long.
Not a chance. So our mission today for this deep dive is to break down absolutely everything we now know about this release. We're looking at the freshly announced Threshing Day, which officially drops on September 29, 2026.
Mark your calendars.
Right. We are also going to examine the new Wing and Claw Collection special editions. But look, we can't just talk about the physical books without talking about the culture surrounding them, because the fan reaction to this news has been passionately and wildly divided.
That's putting it mildly. It's really the ultimate collision of publishing strategy, raider entitlement, and just intense modern fandom dynasty.
Oh, absolutely. So let's start with the hard facts. We kind of have to rewind to July 15th, Conscription Day, for those who celebrate. Yarros finally unveiled what that blank Amazon listing actually was. And I think we need to clear up the biggest misconception right out of the gate. This is not book 4.
Yes. Please, if you take nothing else away from our time in the studio today, let it be that. Book 4 of the Empyrean series is still actively being written, and we are not going to see it until 2027.
Right.
What we are getting in 2026 is effectively book 3.5.
So Threshing Day is actually a collection of 13 short stories. And, I mean, we all know the absolute bloodbath that is Threshing Day at Bastiath War College. We've lived it with Violet.
Oh, man. Pure trauma.
But now we are getting 13 distinct perspectives on that exact same brutal gauntlet. And we already have one confirmed point of view character, which is Xaden Riorson.
Huge news.
Huge. And side note, Yarros is generously going to post his POV on her website as well. But this release also has a massive physical component. The deluxe first edition, which is available in the US and Canada while supplies last, features 16 full-color original artworks by Joe Riqueza.
Which is going to be stunning, but honestly, the shift from a single narrative perspective to an anthology is a really strategic move on her part.
Oh, so?
Well, up until now, we have been fiercely locked into Violet Sorrengail's line of sight. By stepping laterally into this short story format, we are finally breaking out of her immediate periphery. The world building is getting a desperate chance to breathe.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, we get to see Bastiath without Violet's inherent biases.
I keep thinking about this like a beloved band. You know when a band goes into the studio to record their next massive, highly produced album, but they know their fans are just starving in the meantime.
Right, they need to put something out.
Exactly. So they release this beautiful, rich album of acoustic B-sides. It's intimate, it's stripped down, and it keeps the fans fed. But I do have a concern here.
Lay on me.
Okay, Onyx Storm ended on a gut-wrenching, massive cliffhanger. I mean, if I'm hanging on the edge of a cliff, I want to know what happens next. Does dropping a prequel anthology right now kill the momentum? Yarros just spent an entire book building.
I get why you'd feel that way, but I would argue it's the exact opposite. It's a necessary palate cleanser.
A palate cleanser.
Think about the cognitive load on the reader. When a narrative escalates to the fever pitch we saw at the end of Onyx Storm, constantly raising the stakes in the very next breath can actually cause fatigue. You need a deep breath.
Okay, I can see that.
By retreating to a past event, Yarros lowers the immediate life or death plot tension, but she drastically increases the emotional resonance. When you eventually return to the main storyline in Book 4, you are armed with so much new context about the characters whose lives are on the line.
So you're saying we need to care more about the secondary characters before she inevitably puts them in danger again?
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, I can see the logic in that. And, I mean, if Xaden takes one of those 13 slots, we have 12 empty saddles left to fill. The fan wish lists are already spiraling out of control online.
Oh, the community definitely has its priorities. Who are we seeing at the top of the requests?
Well, a lot of people are begging for Radok and his dragon Aetrum. I think we all just need some comedic relief after the sheer trauma of Onyx Storm.
We really do.
Seeing how those two pranksters bonded would be an absolute joy. Then there's Sawyer and Slyseek, which would be incredibly poignant knowing the emotional and physical journey he goes on later. And of course, Rhiannon and Fierge.
Naturally.
But to be honest, I'm drawn to the heavier emotional hitters. Just saying Leah Mary's name hurts a little bit, but people are desperate for his POV.
Oh, let's pull on that thread for a second, because Liam's perspective on Threshing Day would completely recontextualize everything we know about him.
Because of his family.
Yes. He isn't just a cadet. He is the son of the rebellion leader. He walked into that valley with a massive target on his back. If a dragon chooses him, it's a political statement.
Right.
If they don't, he's dead, and he knows it. The internal tightrope he was walking that day would be agonizing to read.
Oh, that makes my chest tight just thinking about it. Along those same lines, I would love to get inside Dane Ados' head during his threshing.
Oh, Dane, that would be messy.
Right. His entire identity revolves around following the rules.
Yeah.
But threshing is pure, unadulterated chaos. Dragons do whatever they want.
They really do.
Seeing his naive first-year intentions clash with that lawless reality before everything went so wrong between him and Violet, I mean, that would be fascinating.
And, you know, we shouldn't limit ourselves to the current generation of writers. Yarros is notorious for planting clues multiple books in advance.
Wait, really? You think she'd go back that far?
Oh, definitely. Threshing isn't just a ceremony where humans cross their fingers and hope to get lucky. It's the moment when ancient, highly intelligent dragons make their choices based on their own secret motives, politics, and histories.
Wait, so you think we might get Brennan Sorrengail's threshing? Maybe get some actual clues about his connection to Naelin? Or even Violet's mother, Lilith, in her youth?
Absolutely. I mean, a story about Lilith's threshing wouldn't just be a fun, nostalgic throwback. It would be a Trojan horse for massive lore drops about the older generation's secrets.
Okay, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here for a second because I'm honestly a little skeptical.
Go for it.
I hear you on the lore drops and the political tension of Liam's situation. But practically speaking, we are talking about 13 stories centered on the exact same event.
Right.
How does she write 13 versions of a cadet standing in a field, sweating, waiting for a dragon, without it feeling incredibly tedious? It sounds like a creative writing exercise, not a compelling novel.
That is a very fair critique, but I think it ignores the psychological landscape of the event. The external action might be identical, you know, standing in a valley, but the internal stakes are entirely unique to each writer.
How do you mean?
Think of it as the Rashomon effect applied to fantasy world building. Rydok is terrified, but masking it with humor. Dane is burdened by the crushing weight of his father's expectations. Liam is navigating deadly rebellion politics. Imogen is guarding her mind with everything she has.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the physical field is the same, but you are visiting 13 entirely different emotional battlegrounds.
I hadn't considered that angle at all. So the repetition of the external event actually highlights the stark differences in their internal trauma. That's clever. And, you know, while Yarros is expanding the narrative perspective, Red Tower Books is aggressively trying to solve a physical problem for the fandom, which leads us perfectly into the aesthetics of this release and the newly announced Wing and Claw collection.
Yes. We are seeing a really interesting pivot here from the story as a narrative experience to the book as a physical, curated artifact.
For sure. So Red Tower announced they are releasing new special editions of Fourth Wing and Iron Flame on September 30, 2025. They're calling it the Wing and Claw collection.
And people are thrilled.
They are. And the defining feature, the thing that has everyone talking, is that they will have dragon sprayed edges specifically designed to perfectly match the deluxe edition of Onyx Storm.
They are directly addressing a very specific, incredibly loud grievance in the romantasy community with this.
Oh, they are putting out a massive fire. Yarros even noted that fans explicitly voted for this. The original first editions of Fourth Wing and Iron Flame had gorgeous sprayed edges that match Onyx Storm, but they are impossible to find now.
Scalpers got them all.
Yeah. If you didn't snag one on day one, you completely missed out. So thousands of readers were staring at their bookshelves frustrated because their copy of Onyx Storm looked entirely different from their first 2 books.
Right, and to really grasp why this matters so much, we have to look at the culture of the romantasy genre, particularly in the book talk era.
Which is its own ecosystem.
It really is. For this audience, reading isn't just consuming text. The physical bookshelf is a curated display of identity. It's social signaling. It shows your passion and your dedication to a fandom.
That's so true.
The publisher clearly listened to the frustration over mismatched shelves and provided a solution, and they did it ethically. There is no new bonus content in these re-releases.
Which is so refreshing.
Exactly. If you like your standard copies, you don't have to buy these to get an extra chapter.
I really do appreciate that they aren't hiding new story content behind a paywall. It's a lot like the aesthetic in this studio, actually. Look around at the teacups we use here in the Nook.
Very fancy.
Right. If you have a beautifully curated, matching set of fine china, and someone replaces one of them with a random, clunky plastic mug, it drives a collector crazy. It ruins the vibe.
Totally.
But let me push back on this whole culture for a second. Is this intense focus on deluxe editions, sprayed edges, and matching sets actually enhancing the reading experience? Or are we just turning literature into expensive aesthetic trophies?
I think it's a delicate balance, honestly. On one side of the coin, a beautifully crafted book honors the emotional investment of the reader. When you love a story, you want the physical object to reflect that beauty.
Sure.
It elevates reading to a tactile sensory experience. But on the flip side, the publishing industry is absolutely capitalizing on the fear of missing out. FOMO is a powerful economic driver.
It really is.
It transforms a piece of literature into a collectible commodity. As long as the story remains accessible to everyone in a standard format, these aesthetic trophies are harmless. But it does show how eager the industry is to monetize fan devotion.
Well, speaking of fan devotion, we really need to dive into how the fandom is manifesting their feelings about the Threshing Day announcement. Because Red Tower might have fixed the aesthetic issues on our bookshelves, but it seems like they completely misjudged the fandom's narrative patience.
It's been rough out there.
Yeah. We took a deep dive into the Reddit threads, and I have to impartially report the community is heavily fractured.
It's a fascinating case study in how modern readers interact with authors.
Let's look at the backlash first. A huge chunk of readers feel that ending Onyx Storm on a dramatic cliffhanger, only to follow it up with a prequel anthology, is a slap in the face.
Ouch.
Yeah. One Reddit user explicitly called it inheritance game-style milking. The accusation is that authors procrastinate on writing the difficult main plot by churning out novellas, side quests, and prequels just to keep the revenue stream flowing.
That's a heavy accusation.
Very. And some fans are pretty brutal, pointing out that Iron Flame and Onyx Storm already felt incredibly dense and sometimes rushed, so a detour is the absolute last thing they want Yarros focusing on.
That backlash is a direct result of the pressure cooker environment that fast publishing authors create for themselves.
But there is a fierce defense force on Reddit too, to be fair.
Right.
They are quick to point out that Onyx Storm only came out a year ago. Yarros is literally fulfilling direct fan requests with these short stories. People have been begging for Red Ox POV for years.
That is true. They did ask for it.
And the defenders brought out the ultimate fantasy trump card, George R.R. Martin.
Of course they did.
They pointed out that A Song of Ice and Fire fans have been waiting a decade and a half for the Winds of Winter. They argue they would much rather wait for a carefully crafted book 4 than demand Yarros rush it and ruin the climax of the series.
I think we are witnessing the dark side of the parasocial relationships built between modern fandoms and authors. In the digital age, readers have direct, daily access to authors via social media.
Yeah, they feel like they know her.
Exactly. It creates an illusion of ownership over the creator in the story. But the real trap here is the precedent Yarros set. She produced the first 3 books at a blistering, almost superhuman pace.
It was crazy fast.
She conditioned her audience like a Skinner box to expect instant gratification. Now that she is slowing down to a normal, sustainable publishing schedule, it feels like a betrayal to a fandom that was fed too quickly.
Did she basically build a trap for herself then? By writing so fast out of the gate, she set a baseline expectation that she can never maintain without burning out.
Precisely. It's a conflict between the consumer mindset and the creative process. Consumers want their product delivered on schedule, but world building doesn't work on an assembly line.
That makes total sense.
The fact that Yarros is writing Threshing Bay concurrently while she works on book 4 suggests she's using this anthology to stay immersed in the Empyrean world, keeping her creative muscles warm without forcing the main plot before it's naturally ready.
Sometimes you have to step off the main road to see the map more clearly. So I want to ask you, listening to this right now, are we, as a reading culture, becoming too entitled?
It's a valid question.
Is it really fair to demand an author resolve a cliffhanger immediately just because we're uncomfortable with the suspense? Or should we celebrate an author who recognizes they need to step back into the sandbox, play with the lore, and recharge their creative batteries before tackling the finale?
It requires a shift in how we value an author's time. We have to remember that a delayed book is eventually good, but a rushed book is bad forever.
Very true. So as we drain the last of our tea and wrap up our time together today, let's look at the whole picture. We've explored how Threshing Day isn't just a placeholder, it's acting as a crucial structural bridge.
Right.
It's giving us a chance to flesh out beloved side characters whose inner lives we've only guessed at, and maybe lower our heart rates before the chaos of Book 4.
And alongside of that narrative bridge, the Wing and Claw collection is satisfying the intense curatorial demands of the Romantasy community, ensuring our physical shelves look as cohesive as the world building.
Even if this entire publishing maneuver undeniably tests the patience of readers who are absolutely desperate for the next main installment, it is a brilliant, highly debated strategy.
Knowledge is always most valuable when you can see the whole board. Understanding the strategy behind Threshing Day, both as a psychological narrative tool and a clever publishing event, helps us appreciate the broader ecosystem of how these stories are delivered to us.
I couldn't agree more. And speaking of the ecosystem we're building, we want to gently remind you that the Reading Nook Studio is growing every single day.
It really is. We love having you here.
We love having these deep analytical dives with you. If you enjoyed poring over these pages and unpacking the fandom drama with us today, we'd love for you to pull up a chair permanently. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video so we can keep saving you a seat right here in the Nook.
There is always a new layer to uncover, and we love exploring those hidden depths with you.
But before we let you go, we want to leave you with one last thing to steep on. Something that wasn't in any of the press releases or the heated Reddit threads.
Ooh, I love a good theory.
We spent this entire deep dive looking at Threshing Day as a way to understand the human writers better, right? To see the trauma inside Dane's or Redox or Liam's heads. But what if this book isn't really about the humans at all?
Oh, that is a dangerous question. I love it.
Think about it. Threshing is the day the dragons choose, not the writers.
Right?
What if delving into the minds of 13 different dragons on the exact day they bonded reveals a secret draconian agenda? What if this seemingly innocent prequel anthology is actually a Trojan horse that will entirely flip the script for the conflict in Book 4?
I mean, if the dragons are playing a long political game that the humans haven't even realized yet, a blank book with no description is the perfect place to hide the evidence.
Sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones hidden behind a blank cover, just waiting for us to figure out the real game being played. Until next time, keep reading, keep questioning, and we'll see you back in the Nook.